Hello Planet Destiny, it's your buddy Beard Grizzly, and I was asked to get a video together for everyone around the community to get caught up on this guy they call the Drifter. I mean, I couldn't tell you why. It's not like there's a new rather important update that just came out for him at all or anything. Unless there is, and I've just been under a rock. Okay, jokes aside, let's dig into the Drifter's general person. We won't be looking into any lore from Joker's Wild, however, so keep that in mind in case you're looking for that in this video. What makes him tick? What turned him into the guy that he is? How old is he? Stuff like that. Consider this your general overview. We're going to keep fan theories and my own speculations out of things for now, or so long as I don't go too far off the beaten path, but trust me, I have several things we could dig into. The basics are very important to make those assumptions and speculations anyway, so here we go. Before we get too far, however, I do want to make a rather large distinction. Within our current lore, we've seen a number of different names for Guardians as a whole. Guardians are more of a collection of similar style and like-minded light users that gather in the city. At least largely so. There are other groups that conspire to join with the Guardians in the vanguard of the city, like the Firebreak Titans for instance, but there were other groups that formed from the Dark Ages for these light users. The first title we see that we've been given is called Risen. Risen seems to be for basically anybody that has a ghost, but this is before any kind of overall collection of groupings were put together in this new position around the system with these light bearers and light users. Now, I just gave away one of the other ones, but anyway. We were then given the Warlords and the Iron Lords. The Risen now had titles, and they, in general, had sides on where they kind of stood, where the Warlords were turned to the Iron Lords, or they were put down, presumably, for the most part. But now things get changed a bit. With the founding of the city and humanity's understanding of these Risen, they had their general title changed to Lightbearer. The Drifter is marked as a rogue Lightbearer, which this isn't the first time we've heard of something similar to that. One stretch I could reach for as well is the title of Rogue Hunter, in the case of Shin Malphur, but more on him later. This is important to showcase and present as it says that he is a Lightbearer, not a Guardian per his general standpoint or philosophy. Anyway, I just wanted to make the point of this, as it's, I think, kind of important, especially as we go down some of the later DLC, I think, as we're starting to notice in the lore. There are different standards for Lightbearers out there. That's the point in a roundabout way that I'm trying to make, I guess. The Drifter is an old dude, at least in terms of guardianship itself. There's a few mixed records in terms of age for him, however, and a couple moments I wanted to bring up for why. I'll be skimming through a lot of lore that we have at present, but if I go a bit too fast, the exact entry can be found on ishtarcollective.net, and I'll have its entry name listed on my patented Grimoire cards. Totally mine. I didn't gank these from some Bungie website and edit them down at all. No, sir. I guess the sarcasm's a bit thick today. Ironically enough, when we talk about the Drifter, I guess it's fitting. Anyway, that age thing. In the lore book, A Drifter's Gambit, the narrator of events simply called the Renegade mentions that Drifter left Earth to the outer systems the moment he was resurrected. Something apparently caused him to leave the system, something that drew his attention that way. The entry says, "He told me he left the system as soon as he was risen. Not immediately, sure. Had to get his bearings, find a ship, get it fit, get it flying. But soon as he was good as gone. Drawn to the outer," he says. I can appreciate. Where we can question this story comes from different pieces of in-game dialogue and the newer weapons called Breakneck from Gambit's progression missions. Voice lines have been a real issue to not only capture but catalog with Destiny 2. I can at least recall a few of them that make me question the validity of him up and leaving right away after he was resurrected, like comments about how Aphrodite trashed his bar that he owned, with Breakneck giving us an idea of what kind of business was done in this bar. It seems like a rather established location, especially if the Iron Lady of Good Aim was around it once in a while. Maybe that's where Shax and Aphrodite got hammered after a long day. I don't know, just a thought. Drifter also has a thing for older equipment from the Dark Ages, and he speaks on it highly. He holds true to the old classics. Most of what we use in Gambit is kit-bashed. Mostly. His words, not mine. Still, I can appreciate liking the old equipment and feeling it's better than the new stuff. The old saying, they don't make them like they used to. Sounds like a pretty apt and heavily related piece to say for Drifter on a whole. I also get this feeling from a segment of the Ancient Apocalypse Hood where it says, anyway, my crew, or a little subset of it, we leave the system together. Dawn of the City Age at the time. We were looking for something greater than light, because we had seen that light can be the cause of so much strife. This paints a somewhat interesting picture as it kind of shows that the Drifter understands the difference between the Dark Age and the City Age and the founding of it and when everything started to kind of crop up. So the understanding may possess itself towards some or all of those involved. There's also the mention within the Black Armory papers of a ghost marked with a terrible light and being called Red. From the Hunter's Ancient Apocalypse armor, we see that Drifter's ghost is red, where the entry reads, he gripped a massive hand cannon in his fist, and his ghost buzzed around his head like a carrion fly. Its light was as red as a Vex eye. This might be similar to that of Ashermir's ghost for a little extra credit, but I will stress it doesn't confirm anything. If the Guardian described with this red ghost as the Drifter, however, then he's very old. Like, from the time of the Dark Age starting sort of old, like Collapse Days old. I'll leave this one here, but still find it interesting, the possible connection. Regardless, the Drifter seems like a guy that's been around for quite some time. His ultimate goals are his alone, but another spot from the Ancient Apocalypse Hood says, we searched far and wide. Must have been hundreds of years. We found a planet beyond the system bristling with an energy that repulsed light. Naturally, we were curious. We landed, intended to settle and conduct the research necessary to make this energy portable. A weapon out of legend called Thorn had similar light-repressing capabilities. Actually, it gives us a small timeline on Thorn here, too, with it being during the Dark Ages, but anyway, topic for another day. Either in a bid to take out those with light or simply be the one that controls Lightbearers as a whole, Drifter is looking for a power that could end the Guardians on a grander scale. In general, I could almost relate this to what Gaul was doing in a way, but instead of trying to control light itself, Drifter is looking for a kind of deterrent for it, almost as if he wants to keep a type of mafia-like hold over Guardians in general. My feelings, anyway. Could be it's for a grander reason, one where he's still our buddy and comrade in arms, but knows that there's only a few ways to end the dark, and using their own powers against them can just help in understanding them a bit more. Almost seems like Drifter's a warlock with some of the research he does, but Renegade from a Drifter's Gambit says it best. While Guardians have been waging war with the Taken, while the city's newest legends have been trespassing on ascendant ground and kicking in Taken skulls, the Drifter's been playing warlock, which he ain't, if it wasn't clear. Drifter's been seen taking out city-bound trains with Tex Mechanica gear, as shown in the Ancient Apocalypse Titan armor, and he's been causing havoc across the system with the game that he sets up, most of you will know called Gambit. It's rather fun, however. He very much stresses that it's just a game, and that we should all come and play it. But the implications of playing with dark energies, along with summoning up powers of the dark, is anything but a game for the Vanguard, and those that might look him over. Granted, there's some new lore that we've been given, kind of, that counters that notion, where the Vanguard are seemingly fine with Gambit, so long as it ultimately doesn't kill any Guardians, like they know. Drifter is seen being able to command a series of Taken Primevals out on the Emerald Coast in the Hunter Ancient Apocalypse gear. Here, he takes out a series of Cabal that ultimately get cut down by these Primevals. In a bounty you can get from Drifter called Primeval Slayer, Drifter says in the flavor text, "Primevals are the oldest Taken my banks can find." How'd I pull this off? If you knew, you'd be running this thing instead of me. I'm sure there's a few other pieces that tell about the ages of these primevals. Renegade in the Drifter's Gambit book mentions how they don't feel like any other Taken he's felt before. Adds to the mystery a little bit. The major question remains, however. How did Drifter get a hold of this Ascendant pocket in the Ascendant plane? I know some fan theories are out there, but per my knowledge, nothing definitive has been presented just yet. Perhaps the thing it's toting around on a ship called the Derelict, by the by, might have an answer. Then again, where'd he get that thing? Well, falls back to the story that Drifter tells in the Ancient Apocalypse Warlock armor, where he and a subset of his crew go out to space to find that light repression field we kind of mentioned earlier, or whatever. In doing so, they come across a world said to be outside of our system that pushes light away. After the rest of his crew is killed by these creatures that have this power in a good old-fashioned gunfight, only Drifter is left, along with all of these large creatures that seem to be housed on the planet. Drifter makes a general mention that they seem extremely close to high physiology, but humanity hasn't come in contact with them at all. Leads me to some wild speculation, I'll tell you what. Savathun, another experiment altogether, another offshoot of the Hive, some other darkness experiment in general. Yeah, well, regardless, Drifter says he might tell us about his escape off the planet since the ship they came in on was rendered useless due to the extreme cold of this planet. My money's on us still not knowing the truth, however, considering the Drifter's general character. When Eva Levante has some issues with you, generally speaking, there might be something worth being mindful of your character traits. Eva's a sweet old lady after all, and seems to be a good judge of character. But we still haven't talked about the biggest connecting piece of Drifter, though it may come back to that subset of his crew we mentioned before. Drifter seems to have been a Dredgen in his past. We actually see this mentioned in the recent Vidoc from Bungie, and it comes from an unlikely source. The Emissary of the Nine. Still curious what's going on with that one. Have some suspicions, like always, but anyway. The Emissary refers to the Drifter as a Dredgen. I have no idea why that one was such a tongue twister, but it is. Drifter counters by saying,
Dredgen.
Nah, not anymore. It's Drifter now.
Dredgens fashion themselves after the once infamous Guardian killer, Dredgen Yor. After his death, we know there was a group that likened themselves to Yor, and wanted to hunt down and examine the inner workings of Yor as a whole. This led to two known shadows of Yor being able to form the legendary Guardian killing weapon of sorrow called Thorn, and for them to pick up titles of Dredgen's Bane and Veil. This is all very Star Wars Sith-ish, if I'm being honest, and the rule of two doesn't seem to be in place here. Shout out to the Extended Universe fans. Anyway, Drifter seems to be worried about one very important Guardian. His title is the Man with the Golden Gun, and more commonly known as Shin Malphur. The owner of the last word and credited with killing Yor, Malphur seems to be tracking Drifter, but only after he seemingly associates the Dredgens again after returning from wherever in the universe he went to before. This is referenced in A Drifter's Gambit under Uneasy Feeling, where it says, I followed him for a short while now, tracked his path since he turned up on mine. He's not like them, but not far off. Hard to trust, hard to know. He's seen more than most can imagine and done things most wouldn't dare, but he's always kept his distance, stayed far away from the light. And from the entry Justified Means, the Drifter wasn't always my target. In fact, he only came to my attention when he started running with them I'd call prey. This all assumes that Renegade is, in fact, Shin Malphur, but the highly likely idea that it is makes this more plausible to believe Renegade is hunting Drifter because of his association that is or once was. In the end, Drifter has been allowed to operate out of the city. It seems that the Vanguard has been okay with him having his little corner, so much so they're about to extend an olive branch to have a more permanent spot in the tower. He's not trusted by everyone, however, and so this leads to some new events we've seen in recent weblore posted up by Bungie over the last few days. Honestly, I would just give it a read during some loading screens for Gambit, since it won't take you long to do so. I should know, I'm not a fast reader by any means, and it only took me about 10 minutes for the longest entry. The final point to look at is some of Drifter's accolades. Some of this is summation from stuff we've already talked about, but let's fire it off anyway. He ran a bar that gathered a lot of information and allowed for a great amount of people to gather and figure out a plan of action. He took off with a crew, or really a group of people, and he alone returned with a ship and a hunk of ice that he keeps in tow. He started up Gambit while taking advantage of a bank system that gathers and compresses motes collected from our foes who are touched by the dark. He gives up his buddy Callum to a renegade who then turns up pasted from gold gun shots on a rock in the corrupted Dreaming City. He works with our Guardian to create a weapon similar to Thorn called Malfeasance. His general accolades are huge. He's been around for a long time. He's a survivor. Chances are, he's far from done. Anyway, there are a lot of other pieces to look into with the Drifter, and of course we have a bunch of new lore that we can finally start to look into, so there's always that. And with the stuff I've already kind of uncovered, I know some of this is rendered kind of useless, but it is good basis to sort of work with. I find him to be a really interesting character from head to toe, the weapons he prefers, the possibility of him being so old, the somewhat likable but untrustworthy nature he presents. His clothing choices, believe it or not, matter as well. His ship, his ghost. Whatever general path we're being led down with him has me intrigued, and I'm curious what the ultimate end will be for all of us if we choose to follow him. For now, I'll leave things there. This is meant to be an open board, a place you guys can put your thoughts about what's going on with the Drifter as a whole, or to write up whatever you otherwise think is important for those to know. Just remember, most of the stories he's told us wouldn't hold up in court. I'll just throw out one of my favorite words: bias. Again, I've been Beard Grizzly, and you guys can find my channel under the same name. Come say hi if you get a moment, if you don't know of the channel already. I'll be getting back to Destiny content here soon enough, since it seems the rest of the gaming market isn't presenting me with other interesting ideas and stories to tell you all per the moment. You know who you are, you disappointing industry you. Thanks to Planet Destiny for having me on, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Enjoy Season of the Drifter and Joker's Wild. I'll see you out in Gambit this season on PC. Until next Spacetime, Guardians, take care.